It was a cold, moonless night when Emily arrived at her grandmother's old house on the outskirts of town. The house was an eerie, forgotten place, surrounded by trees that whispered in the wind. Emily had visited before, but tonight something felt different, like the house itself was waiting for her. She stepped inside, the door creaking as it shut behind her. The air was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mothballs lingered. Grandma had always said the house had a history, but Emily never paid much attention. That was until she noticed the old family portrait on the wall. The faces in the painting were blurry, but one thing was clear: the figure standing behind her grandmother was no longer a part of the family. It was a tall, shadowy figure with hollow eyes, its grin stretching unnaturally wide. Emily's heart raced as she stepped closer to the picture. She could have sworn the figure moved. Suddenly, a soft whisper echoed through the hall. "Emily, Emily." The voice was faint but unmistakable. She spun around, but no one was there, just the shadows creeping along the walls. "Grandma?" she called, her voice trembling. No answer. Emily walked down the narrow hallway, each step creaking beneath her feet. The whispers grew louder, the temperature dropped, and she could see her breath fogging in the air. She reached the door to the attic, but it was locked. She knew something was hidden there, something her grandmother never wanted her to see. Curiosity got the best of her. She found an old key in a drawer and unlocked the door. The stairs creaked as she climbed up, the darkness swallowing her whole. At the top, there was a dusty old chest in the corner. Opening it, Emily found an old diary, her grandmother's, with entries dating back decades. The last entry was chilling. "I have seen him again, the shadow in the portrait. It moves closer every night. I fear it will take me, too." A cold wind blew through the attic, slamming the door shut behind her. Emily's pulse quickened as she turned to leave, but the shadowy figure from the portrait stood in the doorway, grinning, its hollow eyes glowing in the dark. The whispers returned, louder now, filling her ears. "You're mine now, Emily." Panicked, she grabbed the diary and ran downstairs. But the house felt different. The walls seemed to close in around her. The front door, once open, was now locked tight. She could hear the sound of footsteps behind her, slow, deliberate, and growing closer. She rushed to the window, but when she looked outside, the trees weren't swaying in the wind. They were still, as if watching her. The figure appeared behind her in the reflection, its long fingers stretching toward her. She screamed, but the only sound that followed was the whisper, "Emily, you're not leaving." It was a quiet autumn evening when Lucy moved into the old, creaky house on the edge of town. The kind of house people avoid, with peeling paint and overgrown ivy creeping up its sides. It was inexpensive, and she needed somewhere cheap to stay for the year. The landlord, an elderly woman with a sharp smile, warned her to never go into the attic. But Lucy, being new to town, didn't think much of it. The first few nights were uneventful. But one evening, as the sun set and shadows grew long, Lucy noticed something strange. While brushing her hair in front of the bathroom mirror, she swore she saw movement behind her. At first, she thought it was her own reflection, but when she glanced quickly, nothing was there. Shrugging it off, she finished her routine and went to bed. The next night, it happened again. This time, she saw a dark shape lurking in the reflection, standing perfectly still behind her. It wasn't just a shadow, it was something much darker, like it was waiting for her to turn around. Her heart began to race, but when she spun around, the room was empty. Determined not to be scared, Lucy tried to sleep, but every night it grew worse. The shadow seemed to get closer, appearing more clearly in the mirror. One evening, as she stared into the glass, she saw the figure move closer to her reflection. Her pulse quickened as she heard faint whispers, barely audible. The whispers grew louder, but the voice was unintelligible. On the fourth night, Lucy could take it no longer. She rushed into the attic, remembering the landlord's warning. There, in the dusty darkness, she found an old mirror propped up against the wall. The edges of the mirror were cracked, and it seemed to shimmer oddly in the dim light. She stared into it, almost hypnotized by its reflection. Suddenly, a voice echoed from behind her, cold and clear. "You shouldn't have come here." Frozen in fear, Lucy spun around, but the attic was empty. The temperature dropped drastically, her breath now visible in the air. Turning back to the mirror, she gasped. The reflection was no longer hers. It was a twisted, shadowed figure smiling back at her. The voice echoed in her mind again. "You belong to us now." Lucy screamed, but no sound came from her lips. The reflection in the mirror began to move independently, stepping out of the glass and toward her. Her own body was frozen, unable to move, as the figure reached out, its hands cold as death. The last thing Lucy saw before she blacked out was her own reflection grinning wickedly, standing over her, as if it had taken control of her very soul. The next morning, the landlord found the attic door wide open, but Lucy was gone, and the mirror, now shattered on the floor, reflected only darkness. Some say Lucy's spirit is still trapped in the mirror, forever waiting for the next person to come too close.